So welcome to the afternoon session. We have a panel here now that where we're going to reflect on what we've learned this morning and perhaps a few other things as well. This is a very well experienced panel, and I will briefly introduce them. I was told one sentence or less. I have a page for each, so we'll summarize this as best as we can. Right most of myself is Jeanette Gaultier. She grew up in Manitoba, Dr. Jeanette Gaultier, who is currently working for, who are you working for right now? BASF Canada as a technical sales specialist. She did spend some time with the province working as a weed specialist, and prior to that as a pesticide specialist, so has plenty of experience in weeds, weed resistance, from the government and industry sector. And all three of these panelists have a very similar experience with respect to government and industry. And loving it, apparently. In the middle, we have Kim Brown. She's currently the Manitoba weed specialist. She also grew up on a farm in Manitoba, has served many different roles, has worked at Ag Canada as a research associate, and works currently as a weed specialist, also has worked for MASC and the private sector as a regional agronomist. And right next to myself is Tammy Jones. Again, most of us know her already. And she is currently the technical sales agronomist for Corteva, and has also served in the role as weed specialist along the way and worked for other industries, and has plenty of experience in herbicide-resistant weeds because she was there right at the beginning, like some of us in the room. Okay, with that, bifocals would be really good. With that, I'm good, thank you. With that, we'll get started with some of the questions. And I think the first thing we want to perhaps address is to revisit some of our presentations this morning. There were 5 excellent presentations that cover a broad gamut of the weed science world, and then there was one very rushed presentation with a presenter who's not bitter at all. What we're going to do is briefly review that with our specialists here to see what the key takeaways were from this morning. Go ahead, Tammy.
Oh, I was going to say, do you want to start just because, feelings and stuff?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
I don't want to start. I don't remember.
Jeanette, would you like to start, please?
All right. So my big takeaway, we're all dividing the topics here, so I'm probably speaking on behalf of everybody up here. But I do work for a company that does sell herbicides, so although that's not the sole answer, making sure we apply them the best we can is definitely something we need to focus on with our customers. So Tom's presentation, kudos to you. I think all of us say more water, and sometimes we get it. Kim just said more good water, and I think she's also said make every drop count. So a lot goes into that, and it isn't just making sure that we are putting more through the sprayer. It's making sure that everything's optimized, including our water quality. And then I just want to give a shout out to Tom on his presentation style. I think he was to the point, and I think we need to do more of that. My good friend Tammy here, we're often good cop, bad cop. I'm good cop, if you couldn't guess.
I'm good cop.
And sometimes she tells me I am too nice about things when I tell people. So maybe we just need to be a little bit more blunt that, you can spray at 5 gallons, but it's gonna suck.
Okay, go Kim.
So Jeanette made some really good points, and too, I really liked Tom's presentation. I liked all the presentations this morning. For me, I think we know that there's resistance. That's all I talk about is resistant weeds. Even if you ask me to talk about something else, I'm going to bring it back to resistant weeds. I actually have a slide on that, how much I'm going to talk about resistant weeds, and it's 100% of the time. But the one thing that I really wanted to drive home, and we've seen it with work that Charles Geddes has done, and you're doing some of that work here at U of M, Rob, with canola and some other crops as well, and just using those cultural controls that, going back to the agronomy basics. All of us sitting here on this panel are agronomists at heart. We work, with herbicides and weed control, but we are agronomists, and going back to those basics and, growing the best crop you can on every single crop, every single field, every single year. It puts more bushels in the bin eventually, but it also just gives you that first stab at weed control is a really competitive crop. And so all those things that we need to do to keep doing that guys, maybe don't realize. I talk about that at meetings, and I've even had, the odd farmer come up to me and say, I never really thought about increasing even my wheat seeding rate. And I'm like, yeah, literally how much does that cost? So a lot of those don't cost a lot of money or cost very little, and it's just really important to go back to the basics on some of those things.
Okay, I'm ready. I remember. Okay, so Martin, I love that we're no longer, looking for the low-hanging gummy bears, and we are now, having to climb the trees to come up with solutions or reach for the sky. So I absolutely loved that. The other one that I loved was some of the conversation that Franck had with us and the complexity of your diagrams, because Rob's right. I was around when we started talking about Group 1, Group 2 resistant wild oats, and we dumbed it down. Like Group 1s, they don't all act the same. They don't act on the ACCase enzyme all the same. There isn't a silver bullet. There is no one answer. There is no one way that Group 1s work. Group 2s have some different activity, so cross-resistance and those types of things they're way oversimplified concepts. And if you look at what Franck talked about today, we need to get complicated. We need to screen billions of compounds to find the next solution. And if you think that what you're doing now is complicated enough, it's not.
Thank you, all three of you. Those are excellent answers. Maybe we'll follow up on one of Tom's questions next. And Tom was very philosophical in this presentation. And he posed that question, if you're going to go to a cultural practice, which is the one you're going to go first or foremost? So I'd like to hear, certainly from our three panelists, what they would choose. Starting with Jeanette again, sure, with that order.
Nice, I get to pick off the easy stuff. I think it's really easy here in Manitoba to talk about crop competitiveness. So yes, I just did take the easy one. We certainly see how we selected for Roundup glyphosate resistant kochia in soybeans and corn first, which that's different from Saskatchewan and Alberta, where it was in, well, I guess summer fallow, so I guess no competition, but very different cropping systems. But yes, so I think making sure that we are incorporating, it is nice that we do have canola and wheat as pillars of our crop rotation, but then just thinking about all those things you can do to make crops more competitive. I mean, for soybeans, we got bushy types versus stick types, right? Kim already mentioned seeding rate. So all those things that come into decisions around your crop are pretty easy tweaks.
Well, I'm going to go right to the very end of the crop cycle and just talk about weed seed management at harvest. And I mean, I'm a big fan of any type of weed seed management. We can talk about the weed seed destructors. I think those are really great tools. There are some drawbacks. They're not going to work every single time. But at the end of the day, if there's no seed, there's no weed next year. And when we're dealing with things like water hemp, which a lot of you guys have heard me talk about to death, and that's not going away, I'm still going to keep talking about water hemp. When we talk about that one and we talk about the millions and millions of seeds per acre that are going to be out there if you let this even a few plants get away on you, we have to start realizing that with some of these weed species, like getting control on what's happening with those weed seeds as they're coming out the end of that combine. And there's multiple ways you can do it. You just look at what's been happening in Australia, and they start off really simply like doing chaff lining, chaff tram lining, that type of thing. If we've got a few guys in the province doing controlled traffic farming, but all the way up to chaff carts. There's one being manufactured in Decker, Manitoba, which is close to my hometown. It's an Australian style, the boomerang cart. And so, there's lots of different tools out there, again, all the way up to those weed seed destructors that go, integrated right into the combine. So I think we need to look at that, because unfortunately, by the time we realize we've got resistant weeds, it is far too late to do anything about them. They're mature plants, they're going to have seed on them, and unless you're hand pulling or mowing them down, they do end up going through a combine.
Okay, well that leads right into where I want to go, which is patch management in general, right? So that is one version of it, but there are many, many ways to do patch management. And I'm the poster child for patch management. If you will recall, I was on the cover of the Manitoba Cooperator in full size beside a huge pile of water hemp plants, right? Because I lived the dream and gone out and tried to manage the patches. So there, again, are more than one style, type, way of doing patch management. Silage is nice patch management. That doesn't get us to harvest weed seed, but it gets us close. One of the things too, and we're gonna get to this, so this is gonna lead you into where you wanna go. But start at the edges. If it's a big patch, start at the edges and contain it, and then try to get it smaller again. If it's just a few seeds before it becomes a full field that no longer has a yield to it at all, like what did it take? 4 years and we didn't have a yield on that field with the weed spread? So get them early, pull them out, manage them. I compost them in a black garbage bag. There's a fine agronomist in here who delivered me several bags of water hemp one time in black garbage bags, and she said, here, I don't know what to do with these. I didn't do anything. I took them home and let them sit in the sun and rot, because that's how I manage them. So patch management, cut them, mow them, burn them, whatever it is.
Awesome. 3 excellent answers again. Just one follow-up on the patch management. We heard about the harvest weed seed destructor earlier today, and I think what we didn't mention is that even if you have a weed that drops most of its seed before we harvest that seed, what that weed seed destructor will do is reduce the combine spread of whatever seed enters the combine. And we do know, and we saw that from that experiment earlier today, that the combine is probably the best weed spreading tool we've ever invented. And so I think that tool, even if it's not destroying all the weed seeds, it's containing that patch in that spot. Maybe a follow up on the water hemp story, because that is a new story in Manitoba. And we sort of seem to be living the dream, as Tammy says it over and over again. And that is, anytime we have a new weed or a new weed biotype, and a new resistant weed biotype is like an invasion of a new species in a roundabout way. Same principle applies. But every time we have that, it seems to take us a while to figure out what we have. And chasing that down becomes a real issue. And so my question that I think I want to ask the panelists, is there something we can do better in terms of recognizing some of these weeds early, or where are we not doing enough to get the word out, to get the message out, to catch these problems earlier, to contain them and deal with them more quickly?
So I'm currently sitting on the board for the Canadian Weed Science Society, and there was a recent letter submitted by members that outlined what members feel are decreasing capacity for weed research and extension in Canada. And it is true. I think we've all seen it. So it's probably why we're sitting up here with Kim and Rob. So I think this is where we're going to have to starting. Martin, you talked about collaboration in your presentation, and this is probably where we're going to have to start doing this on a broader scale. When it comes to weeds, there's probably going to be no keeping secrets. I definitely live in Clubroot Central for Manitoba. And I do remember when Clubroot was first found, there was some applauding people who came out, and there was some shaming. And I think we have to start doing it with resistant weeds without the shaming.
Well, when you talk about collaboration, I'm very, very fortunate in my position. I get to collaborate with really great people at the company level and university level, and also like really great agronomists. Some of you guys are, yeah. First company, then university. No, just kidding. Anyways, just really great people across, and with Ag Canada people across Canada. But I also am very, very fortunate to get to work with agronomists, and a lot of them are sitting in this crowd. And I think I reach a fair bit of farmers in this province, but we probably have, I don't know, 8,000, 8,500 registered farmers if you look at who's paying checkoff. So, you know, we've got an awful lot of people, and we don't reach them all. And in that group, there are some that we're not going to reach. But I'm very lucky to be able to work with really good agronomists, and I have good relationships with them, and a lot of those agronomists are taking that message back to their farmers, or we've been trying to get that information on water hemp out since about 2018, I think is when you started back in the day, Tammy, 2018? And 2017. So we've been talking about this for a long time, and we just have to just keep talking, and sometimes they need to hear it 2 or 3 times before it sinks in, and once you start to see it, you can't not see it, it's everywhere.
2 or 3 times before it's, 2 or 3 times, yeah. Okay, so collaboration is key, repetition is key. I know we still need to keep it simple, but again, I'm going to go back to we can't continue to just keep it super, super simple, and we have to get into it a little bit more. And I think we need to be a bit more bold and pushy about it. And yeah, I know, hard to believe that I can get pushier. Okay, maybe not me, but the rest of you all can probably get a little bit pushier as far as, voicing your concerns. One of the things that I asked Martin earlier is how can we speed up reporting? So it doesn't really help because it's already out of the pen by that point in time if we detect a herbicide-resistant weed. But the more awareness we have, the more ability we have to manage it. The more we know, the less we have to guess on. And so be curious, continue to work with others. It takes a village to manage all of these weeds, whether it's kochia, whether it's water hemp, whatever. The same concepts apply. So ask the questions. Someone's going to know the answer, and if they don't know the answer, then we need to start looking for those answers. So be curious.
Absolutely great points yet again. Quick follow-up on that though, and that is the extension side of things. Yes, we need to get the message out. We know that. We've obviously over the last 20 plus years seen a reduction in extension efforts and dollars spent on that. So maybe a question to the panel, and perhaps the crowd could send in a question as well. How do we increase that extension effort? What are we missing? Is there something we can be doing differently that doesn't cost us a lot of money necessarily?
I'm glad I picked this stool. I picked it because it's the tall one and I'm short, but I feel like I get to pick off the answer first. So I have 2 things real quick. I just want to make a call out on Kim's previous comment about you guys, agronomists. Some of you have done a really great job hosting some of these topics for your growers. And so I'm going to sound like I'm going against Tammy, but I'm not. I want to simplify things.
It's normal.
It's not. So Tammy's right. I think we have oversimplified resistance, but I think when we agronomists are working with growers, sometimes, like, that was a lot of material we went over this morning, right? Like, that was a lot to take in. We're smart people. We've seen this stuff before. Imagine being a grower and weeds are just one of your issues. So I think when we're working to get the message out, sometimes it's helping them pick the one right thing or the 2 right things to focus on. And once they've picked off those few things and got them down, and oftentimes, I mean, sometimes they just throw in a tank mix with their pre. They do it once and they're like, oh my goodness, like, you get the call. It's like, that was amazing. They're sold. And then it's like moving on to the next concept. So instead of trying to blow a fire hose of water in their face, it might be taking our knowledge and then figuring out what's best for them and picking off a few things. So like just having a hose there and then making sure that we keep throwing some water at it or throwing those tidbits out so they incorporate them over time.
Incremental change. I think Tom said it.
Yeah. Right, I didn't come up with that idea.
Just pointing that out.
So when it comes to extension, that's basically my job, and I do a lot of meetings, and I really thank anybody in the audience who's asked me out, and I keep thinking you've got to be sick of hearing me talk asked out. Well, not legally, but we're not going to talk about that now. Anyways, focus. Sorry. Anyways, yeah, so like we our extension effort as a provincial staff has obviously dwindled. Back in the day, the first time I was a weed specialist, there was 2 of us, and now there's 1. And there was, when you guys did it, there was 1.
Like, there used to be 4 though at one time back in the
I
day.
think way back in the day. When I was a summer student in '89, there was 3.
Anyway.
Yeah, there was lots. So, but we know that as government is downsizing, and that's happening. We know our frontline staff, there's less of them. So we really rely heavily on the local agronomists and the local retails to be putting on information events for their farmers, and we are really thankful for that. And I think we just have to keep working with those people and getting that message out and making sure it's very targeted message. You're right, there's so much information we could throw at them, and the weeds part is just one part of everything farmers have to do. So trying to get that message down into like a really as simple as you can, but with some really good take-home information, kind of like when we all did our master's degrees and you did a PhD, but doing that 3-minute thesis, right? Doing a 3-minute thesis, and everything you did for the last 3 years, tell us about it in 3 minutes and make it good. So yeah, so trying to do something like that and letting the farmers go home with some really good take-home information.
I think everyone online and in this room needs to stop underestimating how smart they are, and share the information that they have with their growers. There are many times where I write an article that is super, what I think, simple, and I get calls going, oh, can you tell me more about that? Because it's reaching someone in a different way than it has before. That repetition is necessary. I understand that simple does resonate, but then we have to actually catch them up pretty quick and get back to the complicated stuff. But yeah, share your views with your growers, because you're going to impact more change than us 3 can, because you're in their fields and you know what they're doing. Oh, sorry, Rob. It's 4.
Okay.
Do you want to add anything?
No, I've nothing to add to this. I'm waiting for my 70 slides I get to show after. I'm going to follow up on this because I think Tammy has hit on something here, and maybe we'll get to start with Tammy this time, and that is, we do have a lot of younger agronomists in this room here that weren't perhaps around in that first wave of herbicide resistance, that group 1, group 2 thing, where things got exciting in the early 90s. And the questions, a 2-part question here is, number 1, what can we as perhaps more experienced agronomists do to help these younger agronomists? And the second part of the question is, for those of us who've been around for a while, what have we changed our mind on this topic? What have we learned along the way?
I've learned there's no silver bullet, but people keep telling me that over and over again. I watched a documentary about consumerism, or I don't know what it's called, Let's Buy, or something along those lines, where Amazon, if you return a package to them, sometimes it costs more than it's worth to redistribute it somewhere, so they just destroy a brand new product. Okay, so we can't recycle our way out of buying everything. We can't spray our way out of herbicide resistance. The new molecules that we thought we were going to get 20-ish years ago, they're not going to be the silver bullet, and the ones that Frank's talking about for the future are going to do the same thing. The weeds are going to evolve something else. So it doesn't matter what it is, we're never going to be able to change. Like, we're never going to win. They're always going to win. We just need to keep our skills sharp and continue to evolve just like they do. If we stay in one spot, yeah, we're sunk. I'm going to stop there because I didn't answer both parts of the question, but I get long-winded, so I'll stop.
Well, I do get to see a lot of these really nice young agronomists, and some are in the room today, and lots are online, and there are so many really, really great young people working in this field, and I just encourage them, to get mentorship. Some companies are really great at mentoring their young agronomists, and I think that's great. We all started off that way once, sometime for some of us a very long time ago. But you know, and from what Tammy said, we haven't had, and what was talked about this morning, we haven't had a new herbicide, a new usable herbicide group in over 40 years. And that is almost as long as I've been working in this industry. So we have not had anything new. So we were dealing with the same old. And so we've got to, again, work with a lot of these young people and still make what we've got still work. For the second part of that, I do have a few examples. Just one I'll give is back in the day when I was an agronomist with a couple of different companies in Manitoba, and we started, you know, I was in when soybeans really got big, what was it, 2010, they really started to move in acres in the province. And I was not a fan of what I call the big sexy bean. I liked the little short ones. They yielded just as well. They were easier for new growers to deal with. They were easier to grow. And I was really worried about white mold because I had come out of the Red River Valley and I was worried about white mold. And now I'm a lot less worried about white mold than I am about resistant weeds. And I know that the big sexy varieties and using high seeding rates can help very much more, especially on solid seeded beans with crop competition. So that is something that I have completely changed my mind on. I am a lot less afraid of white mold, and I can probably spray for that if I need to. So those are things that over time we do change and think, yeah, that's how I used to think. I don't anymore because the herbicide-resistant weeds are getting out of control, especially in something like a soybean.
The fungicide resistance panel that's not up here is like, yeah, just to build on those comments it sounds cliche, but never stop learning. Hey, I work for BASF. I didn't even know that glufosinate came from a natural source or had natural analog. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask questions or push your comfort zone. And my example will be, for me, I am not very business savvy. I am very low risk person. Agronomy is my background. So it's very easy to speak to that. But I think the way things are going, a lot more farms are more cost sensitive. You know, we definitely see that Darren Bond is coming to speak. So I think it's going to have to be somewhat of a shift, I think, to a lot of the people I speak to. It's not about how much you're spending on your soybeans that might not be providing the most yield on your farm. It's what is the cost of these herbicides or this increased wheat seeding rate over my rotation? What's the long game versus the short game? And that might be the way that we have to go. So yeah, just brushing up on my calculator stuff.
Ooh, Rob, embrace tillage. So I come from Southwest Manitoba, and then I went to Alberta. I know, I forgot the second part of the question. Come on, what have I? So my thing is embrace tillage sometimes, right? I come from blow sand area, so I know we're not always going to have the opportunity to utilize tillage, but when we can, it is another opportunity. I like seeding rates, I like spraying fungicides, I like all of that too, but there is no wrong answer except for doing nothing. That's the wrong answer, do nothing.
Good point. The tillage, it's a bit of a personal question for me as well, and we've got some soil scientists in here, and we're going to open it up to the crowd shortly. To me, the tillage thing is a debate that we probably need to have because, of course, we see with climate change, carbon sequestration, and all the rest of it, tillage is a bad word. However, we do have this problem with herbicide resistance, and you know, one of the first go-to tools tends to be tillage, and so we do have to have that conversation with the soils people and others to try to reconcile this in this world where integrated weed management and multiple use or use of multiple tools is very critical. Oh, I was silent for all that? Oh. Last question before we go to the crowd, though, and I want to ask the agronomist sitting here beside me is, do you have any success stories? I mean, most of us have been in this game for quite a while. It's not always doom and gloom. Like, we've managed these problems to some degree relatively well, and there are solutions to this stuff. Can you give us an example of a success story with an individual producer and or otherwise? Tammy? I don't know.
Oh, no, Jeanette, go. No, you go. Okay, so I think the success story for me is the fact that I still get invited to these things. Right? Like, no one's killed me yet, even though there's been some attempts.
I was
But
hoping for less of a personal success story.
okay, okay. So I would say that I can think of a specific field and a specific RM that had been soybeans for many, many years and went to wheat and didn't have any water hemp in it after we forced them to destroy 38 acres of water hemp. That's a success story. It was amazing, and I will never forget that.
Tammy will be signing covers of the Cooperator if you have it.
Funny.
Okay, go ahead, Kim.
I laugh.
I know, like with water hemp, I have a lot of farmers that just that aren't really taking it all that seriously yet, and I struggle with that. But I had a really nice young farmer that unfortunately inherited a field, took on a rented field that ended up having a lot of water hemp in it, and it was beyond what he could manage. And he ended up, he's decided that he's not going to be able to farm that and deal with that weed, so it was something that he wasn't able to do. But I had talked about not spreading that around to the rest of his land, and he actually went and bought an old combine, and he combined that one field with this combine, and he told me he's parking that combine and he's not using it for anything else unless he absolutely has to, because he is not spreading that on the rest of his farm. Now, he did give up that field, so it's somebody else's problem now. Somebody that maybe has a bit more management skills and a bit of a better rotation. It unfortunately had been a bin-run soybean field. There would have been nothing he could have done herbicidally to do anything to fix that. And that we know that happens in the province, but again, hopefully that field is going to be managed by somebody different now. But that was a success story. He took that seriously, and he's decided that it was something he wasn't able to manage well in the future, and so he's moved on, and I think he did the right thing there.
Yeah, mine would be along a similar vein. I got called out to a farm where a particular field had lots of kochia that didn't seem to be responding. So we're seeing multiple resistance, not just to group 2 and group 9 in this particular area, I'm gonna say. So first thing, success story is they reached out. Second part of the success is that we sat down and we went through everything. And it's so funny because the son had been to a meeting and he had seen Kim talk, and we were talking about a lot of the same things. So that was honestly great. And so the next year, they actually started incorporating multiple modes of action. They increased everything to a minimum 10 gallons per acre application on their farm. And the mower got dusted off. There was some patch management going on. Yeah. So I feel like this is a really big success. I will say, though, it's a little bit sad that all of our stories are like retroactive. We have no
disasters.
Proactive stories.
Yeah.
We wouldn't get called there.
Yeah.
I would love not to be called. That would be the biggest success story.
Yeah, there's probably some truth to that. I don't know.
Do you have a success story you'd like to share with us?
Very few.
He works with all of us.
Exactly. I help out in some of those instances, but it's the same deal. Yeah, I mean, it boils down to education and educating, but also the willingness to listen on both sides to hopefully come up with a successful solution on that and work out a plan that works, whatever that plan may be for the farm, because it's not going to be the same for every producer. Very briefly, we have about 10 minutes left. We have one question, I think, online that Marla's going to ask. While we're dealing with that question, if anyone has one in the room, please get yourself a microphone.
The question is, or it starts with a comment. I think some growers are tired of hearing that they need to be so vigilant to manage herbicide-resistant weeds, but then see the RMs let them go unchecked in ditches, drains, and creeks. Growers alone won't be able to control these. What are your thoughts on what can be done to get RMs on board when budgets are so tight?
Pay more taxes, like just start donating to the weed control fund after the road repair fund and a few other funds. Yeah, no, it's so we've all been involved with weed supervisors. We've all been involved with the frustrations of respecting the boundaries of a personal property where for health reasons, for production reasons, for whatever reasons, we're not able to apply effective herbicides into a spot, or the reluctance of a municipality to invest in that when they have so many other urgent priorities that require more funding. It's a challenge. I don't have an answer. I hope one of these three do.
There's definitely RMs or amalgamations of RMs that have some really great weed supervisors, and then there are some that have less so. So I think if that's the case, it's important to voice that to your RM. Often we complain, but we don't actually go to our RM. You can also give chemical.
Yeah, when you call me, the first thing I do is call the CAO of the RM, and I start reading them the Noxious Weeds Act, and that's really boring, so they don't like that. And a lot of them, it unfortunately takes time. I have a few RMs that I'm struggling to work with because they just really don't want to do anything. And there are so many other urgent things that they've told me, well, we'd rather build roads. Yes, I understand that. But there is a law on the books that we have to do weed control of noxious weeds, and some of these weeds, they can affect all of the farmers. One thing that I do notice with a lot of the RMs is that a lot of the counselors there's not a lot of counselors that actually farm anymore. Sometimes it's maybe half, not even half, and I think there's a bit of that disconnect at some of the RMs. But I've told the farmers, and some of them, maybe are in this room or online and watching, that you have to talk to your counselor, and that counselor has to take it forward because it has to get heard more and more. But there is an act, the Noxious Weeds Act, and by law, all landowners are in charge of weed control of noxious weeds on their property, and landowners includes the government, all levels of government on government-owned land, like roadsides and rights-of-way and ditches and things like that.
I think we have a good example too, especially with water hemp coming in. Maybe this is another case where, just like every other level of government, municipalities don't have the same funds, or they're stretched thin. And I don't know how well it's working, but I do know, for example, Brunel, he's sitting here, I'll call him out. They're an agronomist. They offer agronomy services, but they're also working with their RM on, scouting what's not in fields, the water hemp that's elsewhere. And so I think, it's not calling your RM to bitch. Oh,
We talked about this.
I was going to swear.
They thought it was going to be me, but
me.
it's not.
But so long. But coming up with some proactive solutions or recommendations or way to work with your RMs, because everyone's dealing with less funds, so trying to, maybe just stretch things or be outside the box.
I go spray my leafy spurge.
Go spray.
I just hate it, and I go do it myself.
And I work with farmers who mow their own ditches, and if they have that capacity, they mow their own ditches, sometimes right up to the roadside, but for sure on the edges of their fields, and stop that encroachment. And we talk about patch management and weeds moving in from the edges, and that is something that farmers individually, if that's something you can do, I would encourage you to start doing that to protect your own fields.
All right. Thanks, guys. We have one question from the audience, about 5 minutes.
Take more weed ID courses that Rob Gulden teaches, because he's amazing.
The worst idea.
And John back there. Weed ID, so you know what you're dealing with.
All right, let's go to that question from the crowd. Jeanette, sorry, you're cut off.
I have also gone out and rogue sprayed leafy spurge, so I'm with you there.
Preach.
A question, as a lot of us are agronomists or researchers or government staff who are used to being the expert, but also recognize our resource limitations. There's only one of us usually. And what is the role then of farmers as champions, or as a sort of extension of the extension in combating these things? What is the role that farmers can play, in a sense, being us where we cannot be?
Who wants to go?
Go, Jeanette.
You lifted it up. That's right.
I did, but no cursing.
I said bitching. That's a good question. I actually think I've said it before, and I know we all agree here, we were talking at lunch about working together a little bit more. We probably do have some really proactive agronomists, and we were talking about this, like we've gone from 4 weed specialists to 1. Kim needs all the help she can get. Rob needs all the help he can get for multiple reasons. Wow. But you guys are out there. I think because of this, we do see more farmers hiring agronomy services. We do see a lot more farmers attending agronomic things like this. And I think just having those honest conversations, I mean, we've all heard coffee shop talk. When people lay out their yields, it's like, that's not true. But I think if we could convince people that it's not like again, going through the club root experience at home, if we could convince people it's not the worst thing to admit it and be able to talk about these things, we would probably get a lot further.
Okay.
That's a huge hurdle though.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have marketing clubs, we have all sorts of other clubs. You know what we need? We need weed control clubs or agronomy clubs, whatever it is, right? Like, how can we make more money? By controlling the things that are limiting our production. Let's start sharing those ideas. Stop tearing down windrow fence lines and tree lines so that we stop spreading the weeds. And if there is someone in the neighborhood that isn't cooperating, let's manage the edges of that patch. Let's consider that denier a patch and keep it within his boundaries.
And I would encourage farmers just to be really good neighbors, and we've seen this with water hemp. If you know you have water hemp on farm, it's not a reportable pest like clubroot was when it first started, so there isn't quite the shaming I think that's gone on, but there is still a lot of denying, and there's a lot of people that just might not know. But if you have water hemp on your fields, or you know it's in the area, it's something to be talking to your neighbors about, because it can spread so quickly, and we know it's spreading through ditches, through water movement in ditches. So basically anytime water's moving in a ditch, that weed could get on somebody else's land. And so whether you're upstream or downstream of that, you're going to get that weed eventually, probably. So being good neighbors and talking about that, and on those drive arounds when you see things in the ditch that just don't look right, because lots of times they start on the edge of the field and move in. Those are things just to have conversations about, like honest and open conversations about to your neighbors.
All right, thank you, Kim. I think we're probably going to have to call it a panel at this moment. We have less than a minute left. And thank you to the panel for their insights and their thoughts. Thank you for the online question. We will be around, all three of us, through the coffee break. So if there are follow-up questions, please find us then. But
Or we'll find you and just start sharing opinions.
That could also happen. Yeah. But yes, and with that, maybe give the panel a big round of applause, and we'll move on to the program. Thank you.